Welcome back to Political Spirits. I'm your host, Franklin Rye. We still stand for the proposition that the left and the right should have a few drinks and talk. Compromise is not a requirement. If those discussions result in us changing or even abandoning our positions, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine too. We just need to talk to each other. In that way, we can unify through speech. And if the discussion becomes a bit heated at the end of the night, we should still be able to split up the bar tab and be on our way. So what are we going to talk about this week? We have a real treat for you this week. We have a great guest. It's been a long time since conservative movie critic and podcaster Christian Toto has been on the show. He's a busy guy, and we're lucky to have him back on. He's the founder of the blockbuster website HollywoodandToto.com that contains the nearly endless database of his movie reviews, loads of conservative commentary by Christian and his guest authors, and lots of other conservative podcast episodes and content. Christian, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for the nice introduction. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. So there has been a lot that's happened since we last talked. It's been almost 6 months. But the first thing I want to ask is, given that for so much of your life you've been devoting it to critiquing Hollywood films, do you think the Hollywood filmmaking industry is going to survive COVID and the shutdowns? And if so, how will it be changed?
It will survive, but it will be changed, and it will be changed much more than I originally thought. I think if you talked to me a couple of months ago, I was pretty optimistic about the future. I was optimistic about the pandemic fading as well, and that was wrong.
Yeah.
I just get the sense that our society, our habits, the things that we do in our leisure time are changing. And I think we're getting more and more used to getting everything we need at home. So if you want to watch a movie, well, Netflix has a new movie with big name movie stars at home this week or next week, and you could use video on demand. So I think between the delay with theaters opening, the delays behind the big blockbusters, there were a couple of new big films that were just pushed back again, just a couple of hours ago practically. Yeah, I think that things are going to be different. I think that the chances of seeing sort of a mid-level movie, a movie like Irresistible, The King of Staten Island, those are some recent VOD releases. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to stick to VOD land in the future. I don't think you're going to rush out and see those movies, perhaps. And I think that when the theaters do open, it may be exclusively for Black Widow 5 and Wonder Woman Part 2 and sort of the big noisy blockbusters. I mean, I love those films. They're great when they're done well, but that's where I see it heading right now. But I have to say, I think everyone who thinks they have a sharp crystal ball, I think they're kidding themselves. I think everything's in flux right now.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, and I think I went through the same sort of process as you have, and not just with regard to movie theaters in Hollywood. All sorts of assumptions that I've had about the way people would rush to specific industries and that in the end they would just return to their prior form are called into question now. I think everybody's asking themselves, am I really going to go back to eating out as often as I used to? I mean, people are getting used to delivery services. They're getting used to saving the money of not going out. It's going to be a huge change going forward, I think, but we'll see.
Yeah, one anecdote, which is way off of Hollywood, but maybe it matters, maybe it doesn't, but I'll share it anyway. There's a local ice cream shop here in Denver, and when you go there in the summertime, there's usually a pretty hefty line. Not massive, but you're going to have to wait 10, 15, 20 minutes before you're at the counter saying what kind of ice cream you like. They basically kind of revamped their system. You can still get ice cream. You still get good service. The food is great, but you kind of go to a counter. It's just different, but it seems very safe. There's a plexiglass feel between you and the person giving you the ice cream. They have every safety protocol in place. And now when I go there, there's no line. I just walk right up and I get my ice cream. So even when it seems safe and secure, people apparently aren't lining up. They're not thinking about it. They're not going there. They're not flocking to this. And I'll give you another sort of non-Hollywood example. I love baseball. I live for baseball. Spring training is my favorite time of the year. I'm a huge Yankees fan. I was born in the Bronx. Baseball's back, and I don't want to say I don't care at all, but the amount I care is a fraction of what my usual excitement level is. And you think it'd be over the moon because, hey, baseball's back and there's nothing else that's back right now. I'm not feeling it. And I can't even I can't even pinpoint why I'm not feeling it. But, if my interests and tastes can change that dramatically, I think a lot of people are having a similar situation. So maybe it'll take 2 years before the old normal becomes the new normal. I don't know, but it feels like everything's changing.
I feel the same way, and it's, my story would be college football instead of baseball, but I really don't have the same desire that I would have thought I would have. And part of it, I think, is that the scale and the seriousness of the issues that we're facing all around the country and the actions that we're facing are so momentous, and especially for me as a conservative, and I think you probably have a similar viewpoint on this, are so concerning that all of these other things that would normally unite us, like sports, seem petty by comparison.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I'm with you in many ways. I think for me, there's two things going on. One is I think I emotionally shut down on the things that I normally love, like sports and things like that. But also, I look around the country, and it's not where, oh, there are people with whom I disagree, and I'm mad about that, because there's always going to be people who I disagree with. It's not a big deal. I'm used to that. I'm perfectly fine. It's sort of the motto of this podcast is we get to talk about it and have a drink afterwards. We don't hate each other. But when I look around the country and I see violence like I've never seen before, and I see one particular political party, and I see one media apparatus that is basically telling us the violence is fine. The people who are trying to stop the violence, they're the problem.
Yep.
This is a bad country, and that I was brought up to think and was taught that violence is not the answer, and now we're taught it is the answer. And then if you think it's not the answer, then you're the problem. All
and
these things are swirling through my head.
It's the answer that's coming from one side.
Exactly. And I'm not the first person to opine about this particular thing, but when I see these massive, massive protests and no one raises an eyebrow and no one wags a finger at them, and then the next day your local politician says you cannot congregate, you cannot gather, you cannot talk, you must wear a mask, that disconnect is so profound, it takes my breath away. And I think, and part of me thinks that I've always had trust in the American people. We're able to suss out things that maybe even on a DNA level, like we just kind of get it. And for the first time in my life, I don't think enough people are getting it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the silent majority will strike back. And I just have the sense that we've been hoodwinked. And I see friends on Facebook who say, "Well, Trump is a terrorist for, sending in the military," and I'm thinking, do you know the story? Is it that hidden from you? And it is, though. Yeah. If you follow the mainstream movie, it is. Listen, I think I've lost a friend who I've had for 20 years. He was at my wedding. We've been very close forever. We live in different cities now, but we still connect. And I had an argument with him on the phone, and it wasn't even about Trump, because I know he hates Trump and I don't go there. But it was about the media coverage. It was about Governor Cuomo, who he said was doing marvelous. I could barely speak because I realized I know the truth what's going on. And then he said, I believe in the Russian collusion with Trump. And I'm thinking, if you follow the mainstream media, they hide almost everything. And they have a completely different narrative. And I almost don't blame my friend. But my friend hung up on me, said he couldn't take it. And that's the last I've spoken to him. That's maybe 2 or 3 months ago. So I try to follow your ethos. I wasn't hanging up on him. I wasn't name calling him. It was getting heated for sure, but that's where we are. How can we trust our fellow Americans if they're getting the wrong set of facts? And they're not even getting facts.
And that's, I think, at least for people on the right side of the fence, and I actually think some people who are the left of center, I think there's a dramatically reduced level of confidence in the institutions of the society, with the media being one of them. I mean, I used to think it was a matter of bias. I now think on a regular basis it's flat out lying. It's a deliberate attempt to manipulate facts and descriptions to fit a particular narrative, whether they actually fit the narrative or not.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen multiple examples with both with President Trump and with, I forget her name, slipping my mind, his press secretary, where they would listen to it. Yeah, Kayleigh McEnany. They'd listen to a series of comments. They would slice and dice them. to make the news completely different than what she said or completely different than what Trump said. And then that's the news cycle that's repeated across the board. And then you go on Facebook and all your friends say, oh my gosh, I can't believe Kelly McEnany said this, but she didn't. So that isn't just bias, like you said, that is
Yeah.
out and out fraud. And we're seeing out and out fraud within the industry. And I'm thinking, where's the next Bernie Goldberg? Where's the guy or gal who's going to blow the whistle and say, listen, I'm not a Trump fan, but what I see from my fellow journalists has me appalled, and we need to stop it because, as you said, our trust in all the institutions is fading, if not gone. The media, Hollywood, academia, the medical community, that said that we need to kind of hunker down, stay at home, social distance, wear a mask. But if you're protesting toward a certain cause,
Yeah.
have at it. Now, I mean, I can't believe that a person who is on the fence about Trump or Biden is going to say, my golly, I couldn't go to my aunt's funeral because of these rules. And yet I see these people protesting and rioting, and no one wags a finger at them. No one condemns them. How does that not just stick in their craw? I mean, how many people have lost loved ones, have been to weddings that were compromised, haven't been able to go to church, haven't been able to go to school, and then they see the media fawning over these mass demonstrations? How does that not register? But I don't know if it is.
I share your concern. I had a very intense discussion recently with some friends who were on various sides of the fence on that. One of them was very concerned about the way the election was going to go, and he's on the same, right side of the political fence as I am. And I think it really boils down to just what percentage of the country is looking at it and saying, okay, I don't believe this. That's ridiculous. That we're not being told the truth. They're actually examining things. Maybe they go out and they look for some alternative explanations. And what percentage is just sucking everything up from the mainstream media and figuring that's the way it is. They don't want to be bothered with examining potential alternative explanations or even looking at it critically without even going searching for another explanation. Some of it, as you said, is just so obvious that it's wrong. They should know better, just as sentient human beings. But for a lot of people, that doesn't happen, and it's all about what are the percentages. Are those people that just flat out believe the mainstream media, are they going to show up in the polling place? And I have to admit, I don't know. I think the polls are slanted. I think they're deliberately weighted to underrepresent Republicans. But the question is that enough to explain the relatively large gap right now with almost all of them, with the exception of Rasmussen, which is showing it dropped all the way down to 2 points? That, for me, is very encouraging.
Yeah, and also, the polls today could be wildly different in a week, 2 weeks.
Yep.
Trump could have a major gaffe. Biden could have multiple gaffes that finally get, shown. I don't think that Biden is going to debate Trump. I think he's going to duck it in some capacity. But if he does, I don't think he could hold up well under tough questioning. Just one other kind of super anecdotal example, but I have a friend. I knew her very little, but she was sort of a friend of my wife's, and we're kind of in the same circle on Facebook. And she was recently ranting about how it's fascism, what Donald Trump's doing, sending in the troops, blah, blah, blah. And part of her rant was, if you disagree with me, I will block you. So, I mean, I think that's where we're going in our society. We're just kind of closing, putting our hands over our ears and saying, na, 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 and we can't even hear it. That's part of the problem. But also, look at this social media giants and how they're clamping down on things. Who knows how more aggressive that will be in the coming weeks? I mean, will my message? I mean, I've been kind of wanting to reach out to her and kind of explain things in a very cool and calm fashion. I haven't had a chance to do that, but if I did, would that be blocked? Would other stories be blocked? How do we reach our friends? If we engage in fights on social media, that's almost always a disaster. It doesn't change hearts and minds. I think you have to kind of approach people like that who are kind and good people very, very carefully. But even then, is it effective? My friend, who I may no longer be friends with, he's been absorbing 3.5 years of the anti-Trump media. Trump has done some bad stuff. He's gross at times. I get it all. But there are so many outrageous stories that were patently false that were proffered up to attack Donald Trump. If you absorb that, you think that my little monologue on Facebook is going to change 3.5 years of indoctrination? Not a chance.
Not if
But that's
not
what
if
we are.
you're sucking it up uncritically, and I think
Yeah.
huge numbers of people are doing that. Go ahead.
You and I, this is our area of interest. I mean, I do it professionally. You do it on this podcast, and I'm sure, it's just sort of part of your passion. Most people are living their lives. They're raising their kids. They're going to work.
Yeah.
They're hustling. They're cleaning their house. They don't have time to dig into what Trump said actually wasn't true. If you hear the whole tape, it's the opposite. People just don't have time for that. They lean on the media to share the news. And if the media is doing the complete opposite, then they don't get the real story. And I don't blame those people. I'm the weirdo. I'm the weirdo who's sort of examining 6 different sources. And when you're conservative, you get the narrative of the media from Hollywood. You can't avoid it.
Yes.
And then you look to your own sources, which hopefully are more reliable, like National Review and Reason. There are good websites that are offering, facts. So we get the whole story. We get to see what's going on. But if you're a left of center person who's not digging deep, you're watching Colbert. You're seeing the nightly news. You're getting the New York Times, which you all thought were reasonable, rational outlets, and they're not anymore. And how could you possibly kind of come to a different conclusion? Now, I think what you and I are hinting at is that given all of that, if you see the media basically do a silent cheer for the protesters, and then the next minute say you can't gather with your grandma even though she's dying, maybe that's the kind of thing that will sink in over the next 3 months. I don't know.
Maybe. One thing that, too, just one final point on this issue of not picking up the alternative viewpoints, which happens primarily or to the large part with people on the left. I think it was John Locke who said, he who knows only his side of the case knows little of that. I mean, that's the problem that results. One of the reasons these arguments can be so intense is that it's very easy, as you point out, to get the feedback, to get the information from the left side of the spectrum, because so much of the amplified voices in society are on the left. The news media, Hollywood, academia. You don't hear the right side unless you go hunting for it. So people on the right, they're going to hear the left, and when they go out hunting for it, they're going to hear the right too. People on the left, they're only hearing the left in many instances, so they're unprepared to defend their opinions and beliefs because they've never had to. They've never heard an alternative explanation. They've never thought about it. They've just sucked up all of this information from the left side of the spectrum and taken it as truth and gone on with their life. And then when they confront somebody that challenges that, they don't know how to deal with it. And that's why some of these confrontations end up being so intense, unfortunately.
Well, I think conservatives for years have had to think about their positions, work them through intellectually, and then present them in the public arena. If you're left of center, you just have to say X. You just have to spit out your position. You haven't thought about it. You haven't been challenged on it. You haven't had a chance to really examine it. And I think the net result of that is the shut up, you're a racist, shut up, you're a homophobe, shut up, you're a xenophobe. When they can't really think through their vision and they can't really defend what they're saying, then the plan B is they're going to shut you up. And that could be on college campuses, that could be elsewhere, that could be using those ist words or, homophobe. That's how they shut you up. They don't have, if you want to tell me that open borders is the way to go, let's have that debate. But they won't have that debate. They'll say you hate immigrants. They'll conflate immigrants with illegal immigrants, and they'll call you a racist. And then you're done. Because what can you do?
And that's a great segue to my next question, which is to harken back to our prior interview. One of the points that you made that I found encouraging is you said that Hollywood, in the end, would look back in shame on the way it censored and silenced conservative actors and others in the business, essentially scaring many of them into silence or to say things they don't believe in fear of damaging their careers if they said what they really thought. What I'm wondering now is that as you've watched much of the American corporate world now take the sort of Hollywood approach, and fire people for expressing conservative opinions or even just not quite as woke an opinion. Like, the Sacramento Kings broadcaster who was fired for tweeting "All Lives Matter," every single one. And he
What a
was
monster.
fired for that, actually forced to resign. What does that say to you about whether or how long we're going to have to wait for Hollywood to recognize that the way it conducted itself was shameful, when it seems that the corporate world outside of Hollywood is now starting to adopt that same approach?
I think it'll be years. It could be decades before they realize it. I've been writing about this topic a lot. I just filed a new column for Complete Colorado about this. They need to have shame about what they're doing. I don't know that they're going to wake up tomorrow and say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe what we've done." I will say, though, is that the more artists who are bitten by cancel culture, who feel its sort of fury, the more warriors we have on our side. And I'll just point to J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling is a liberal author, a progressive author. She's very smart. I think she's earned every penny for all the joy that she's given to the Harry Potter franchise. But she wasn't out there, touting free speech. That wasn't her gig. She was, talking about her series. She was talking about gay rights. She was sharing progressive issues, attacking Donald Trump. All of a sudden, she's canceled because she said one thing off the sort of the platform of the left regarding trans issues. And she is, they have attacked her as savagely as anyone in the cancel culture realm. And now she's fighting back. She's signing letters. She's, doing what she can. That's sadly what we need to happen. We need to have more people who get attacked and then realize, oh my gosh, look what's going on. Because otherwise you don't have any stake in this. Ricky Gervais is a comedian. So if he gets attacked, he might not be able to speak his mind. He might not be able to put out the shows he wants. So he's been very, very vocal about this. And because he's in that arena and he feels what's going to happen to him.
And they need to be people who are left of center. If they're only beating up those on the right, then, much of at least half the country gives them no sympathy. Yeah.
Jim Gaffigan is a very funny comedian. He's also a very good actor. He's popping up in a lot of different indie films. And he made a movie, I guess, last year or so. And he was calling some of the reviews for the film that were attacking it because it was about a father and son and their relationship. And he's thinking, why are you attacking the film because that's the focus? You're not saying the film is bad or good. It's poorly written. It's poorly acted. They were upset that it was focusing on male characters. That doesn't seem sane to me. So he got a bit of it. He got like a little bug and said, oh my gosh, I'm trying to make a movie career, so it's basically segueing from my comedy, and I'm being attacked because I'm a man playing a man. It's that absurd. Even Sarah Silverman, who I've been tracking her for a while, a couple of years ago, she's like, you got to listen to the teenagers and the kids. They know where the culture's going. All of a sudden, that blackface episode she did a decade ago, it cost her a gig in a movie that she really wanted. So now she's thinking, maybe this isn't so good. Now, she's very left of center. Jim Gaffigan sort of center left, I'd say, not a hardcore progressive. But when they get bit and they start talking out, then it sort of resonates. And I give Bill Maher a lot of credit. He's as liberal as they come. He can be very nasty. But boy, he gets some of these big issues, and he's not afraid to speak out about it. And he's basically warning his fellow progressives, this is dangerous on multiple levels. And I don't think they're heeding it, or they're too afraid.
Well, and one of the things that I did an article on redstate.com about this corporate move to fire people for not being sufficiently woke in their public statements. One of the things I think that we need to do as a populace is we need to criticize those corporations. We need to basically say that you are aligning yourself with suppression of speech. And so if you're, an American corporation with 200 years of history and goodwill built up, and now you've got executives who terminate somebody because they say, all lives matter, and we basically need to label that corporation and those executives as suppressing speech. That's what they're doing. That's how they're damaging the brand of that corporation. Those kind of statements about the companies that take these actions, you really don't see them. You might see somebody say something like that on Twitter, but that needs to be the pitch. It's not that, we want people that endorse Rachel Maddow to be fired. We don't want anybody to be fired for their political beliefs.
Yeah, it's a tricky subject. And I think part of the reason why it's complicated is that if you were to go out there and basically protest or have a boycott of these companies, I don't know what would be left. I mean, you could think about the different streaming platforms and some of the positions they've taken, which can be ugly at times. What would you have left to stream into your house? I mean, Hulu and Netflix have some really radical stuff flowing into our homes. In all, how many companies? I mean, if I start sort of lashing out at companies that are following these antics, what's left? So I think those are tricky. We've seen it the opposite happen when Goya Beans. I don't know if that's the full name of the company, but Goya.
Yeah.
I think there was sort of a boycott where conservatives were buying it, and it seemed to backfire on the left. They tried to cancel Goya because the president of the company said some kind things about Trump. I think that blew up in their faces. I think the same thing happened with Chick-fil-A too. They try to cancel that, and I think people just kind of rallied around it and said, "Hey, this is good food." So it's really tough to figure this out. And I agree completely. It's not like I don't care that a company likes Biden or likes this, but if you're canceling free speech, that's different.
It's the firing of employees who disagree with them on the politics that I'm getting at. That they, the executives are sort of virtue signaling to the people with amplified voices that are on the left side of things that hate Trump, and they're terminating people if they say they like Trump. Or in the case of the Sacramento Kings broadcasters, say all lives matter, every single one. And what you see is an argument over whether the person should have been terminated. What you don't see is labeling of the executives who endorse this as endorsing suppression of speech. So it's the way that it's described. It shouldn't be an argument about which political view is right. It's that you basically are suppressing speech. You oppose the nature of a free society, of a democracy, because the only kind of society where everybody agrees is a dictatorship, because they know if they express a different opinion, they'll end up in prison or killed. In a free society, there's going to be a disagreement. And when a corporation tries to prevent people from being able to disagree politically, then I think the people in that corporation, the argument against them should be, you oppose free speech, you oppose a free society. And I think that could have an impact if said enough by enough people, including some with amplified voices in society. And we don't really see that. We see a questioning about, was this person right to express this thought? No, it should be they were expressing a thought. Aren't we all about having a country where you can express your thoughts?
Well, we just saw Drew Brees, the quarterback, say he took a very strong stand for the American flag. He basically apologized 14 times, maybe 16 times. I lost track of the apologies. Meanwhile, there are NFL players who have either said or supported anti-Semitic comments, and nothing happened to them. So there's lots of hypocrisy here. But just give another example of what's going on here. Judy Gold is a comedian. She's very left of center. She just loads Trump with every fiber of her being. Well, she has a new book out. It's called Yes, I Can Say That. And the subtitle is When They Come for the Comedians, We're All in Trouble. And I had an interview with her this week. We had a very, very enjoyable chat. And we didn't get political. We just talked about free speech. And I looked at her book cover. And the book cover's got blurbs from Chris Rock and Jon Stewart and Rosie O'Donnell with some big, big names. And I'm thinking, they're all there supporting Judy Gold and her free speech book. Where are they elsewhere? When was the last time Jon Stewart, banged his fist on the desk and said, we need more free speech. I hate Trump, but he should, his followers should be allowed to speak. Yeah. Where is Chris Rock? And by the way, where was Chris Rock when Jimmy Fallon got thrown under the bus for a blackface incident 20 years ago? Jimmy Fallon was dressing up as Chris Rock, was doing a Chris Rock impression. Obviously a positive, fun, all in the name of humor impression. And then when Jimmy Fallon, when it was rediscovered that he did that, he had a grovel, he was, apologizing. Why didn't Chris Rock say, hey man, that was 20 years ago. He was just having fun. No big deal. How important would that have been? How great would that have been for Chris Rock to stand up for a fellow comedian who's being dragged for a different cultural standard that happened 20 years ago. I mean, I just his silence I thought was deafening, and you're seeing that a lot from one of the reasons why I wanted to speak to Judy Gold is good for her. I don't care that we disagree politically. I don't care. I don't agree with my wife politically, but she's coming out in defense of free speech, about comedians, how they're truth tellers, how we need to hear them, how they shouldn't be shut down. That's important. That's critical. She's being patriotic, and she doesn't have a lot of company in Hollywood.
No, you're absolutely right. And, you mentioned Bill Maher earlier as an example of somebody that defends free speech, even though he is on the left. I get a lot of pushback from my conservative friends because they know I'm conservative, and I'll acknowledge I watch Bill Maher on a relatively regular basis. I find him to be entertaining, informative. He really pisses me off with some of the positions he takes, but I know he sometimes has conservative guests on, and they're interesting discussions, and he defends free speech. And that sets him apart from so many of his brethren out there in the media.
It pains me to say it, and it's absolutely clear. The left today doesn't like free speech. They want to cancel it. They want to diminish it. And for the most part, the right is trying to protect and save free speech. I mean, this is not what it was in, during the 60s. During the 80s, there was more of a kind of a sort of a, I guess, a religious-based suppression, these certain topics and themes and songs and this shouldn't be sort of out there. Maybe they need labels. So it's been a shifting of the culture. But, when I watch the media and I see how the media covers certain topics, and if it's about Adam Carolla defending free speech, I will read different media outlets attacking him for that stance. When his movie No Safe Spaces came out, which had some sort of ideological balance, you had several liberals in the film. It was talking about free speech. It wasn't really political. Boy, that movie got hammered. How dare you, and you're wrong, and you only want to protect conservative free speech, which was clearly not the case in the movie at all. But the media is on that side. They've chosen sides. The media is against free speech. The ACLU is against free speech. I have reached out to them on several times on stories about free speech, and I don't get an answer. That's their game. That's why they exist, partly.
Well,
to defend free speech.
About a year and a half ago, I think it was, they announced a change in position that they would take into account impacts on their supporters in determining whether to support free speech related issues. Translation, if it's a conservative position that might upset the people that donate to us, we're not going to support the right to express that position. That's unbelievable. I know.
When I was a kid, there was a TV, I think it was a TV movie. I think it was called Skokie. It was starred Danny Kaye, and it was based on real events. CLU defended the right for neo-Nazis to march in this community. And I think Kaye's character may have been a Holocaust survivor. I think he was a Jewish man. And it was a very powerful movie about how you have to defend the worst speech if you really want to defend free speech. I mean, and that was like I don't remember much about the movie, but I just remember the theory behind it. I remember the push behind it. It really meant something to me, even though I was a kid at the time.
Yeah.
And that's not the ACLU today. They wouldn't do that.
Unfortunately,
and I guess they would be punished if they did.
So let's kind of switch to a couple of different subjects here. If a conservative were to establish a movie studio, and actor Antonio Sabato Jr. recently announced that he was going to do that, and with a stated purpose of producing films that tend to be conservative or pro-American, trying, or at least not politically correct, would that studio be able to get prominent actors for the films? And this kind of reminds me of the Atlas Shrugged movies, which I was really looking forward to, and they were sort of made for TV at best because they weren't able to, they weren't Hollywood level productions in my view. Is that kind of a movie studio going to be able to get that level of acting support?
I think the answer is partially yes. I think even the busiest, most popular actors have a sense of insecurity about, oh my gosh, when's my next role? Am I going to be fully employed? Am I getting too old to be fully employed? I think I see a lot of actors take roles where maybe the position of the movie might be far left and they actually are a right of center actor. I've seen the reverse of that. Liberal actors taking on projects where it's a limited government theme to the movie. So I think there would be actors that would rally. Maybe not everyone, maybe not the biggest actors, but I think they would be talent. And also, I think today's product in movies isn't as star driven as it once was.
Yeah.
So I don't think listen, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie made a movie 4 or 5 years ago. I think it was called By the Sea. And the marketing for it was terrible and it flopped in spectacular fashion. But you had two of the biggest movie stars in the world who are all Mr. and Mrs. Tabloid about their marriage and their divorce and their romance. So, big names don't guarantee seats. But what I'm thinking, there are other issues that would be in play with this particular movie studio. In theory, would they get a lot of publicity? Would mainstream media outlets cover these stories? Would they review these movies? Would these actors be able to go on Colbert and Kimmel and promote these movies? Would the ideology trump the content? Would it just be like rah rah? We're for limited government, and oh yeah, by the way, the movie's mediocre. There are tons of obstacles in the way. Plus, I think conservatives have done a very poor job of rallying behind conservative product. Look at the box offices for Richard Jewell, a terrific movie that came out late last year from none other than Clint Eastwood. It bombed at the theater. You couldn't write a movie that was more aligned with the right at that particular moment.
Yep.
It was anti-journalism. It was suspicious of the FBI. It had everything in its favor, and people didn't rally around it. Even like No Safe Spaces, which was, marginally successful based on a lot of different factors.
And I thought it was very well done.
It was beautifully done. And I don't say that loosely. It didn't make a lot of money. Why didn't every conservative say, you know what, I need to go support that movie. I need to show Hollywood that we're going to make this a hit, and they're going to be forced to make more of them. Why do you think we have a faith-based film industry right now? Because The Passion of the Christ made zillions of dollars, and other movies were very successful too. Now Sony has a branch, a division that focuses on faith-based movies. They've proven to be successful. Christians, to their credit, will go support these films. Conservatives, maybe I'll watch it when it comes home.
What was the movie? I'm trying to think of Hollywood mistakes with Christian films. I think it was it might have been actually titled Noah, the one with Christian Bale in it, where wasn't the director an atheist that they hired to direct that movie?
That was the name is escaping me. He's a big time director. He saw it as more of a environmental film. He wasn't faithful to the source material. And it was funny because the box office, it opened fairly wide and it did fairly well. And then it sank like a stone because the word of mouth said, oh, this is not a film that's going to appeal to the Bible crowd.
Yeah, they just can't help themselves sometimes.
They can't. So other examples where smaller films were much more successful because they knew their audience.
Totally different subject, kind of last two quick ones to wrap up. To what extent do you see a blowback coming against Hollywood for their connections with China, the altering of content, either because of pressure from China or to ensure access and sales in the Chinese market? How bad do you think blowback is going to be on that?
I don't think it's bad. I think most people don't realize it. I think the media has covered up China's complicity in the virus. I think most average moviegoers don't get that connection yet. I don't know what will change that. Even the horrors we're hearing out of China just in the last few days about putting people on trains and how they're torturing Muslim populations. It's just not getting through. People on the right are getting the message, but I don't think the general public is there yet. So I don't think there's going to be an impact as of yet.
One final question, just sort of the shotgun style of wrapping this up. One last one. A totally different subject. So the Tom Hanks war film Greyhound, it wasn't released in theaters because of COVID, and it's only available through an Apple TV subscription service. Do you see more of that coming, where major movie releases are direct to streaming, and it's only on a single service with no theater showing, even after COVID is gone. Do you see that becoming more common?
Well, I think Netflix has been doing it for a while, and I think their model seems to work in that they keep doing it. They keep writing those huge checks. They keep getting the Adam Sandlers, the Martin Scorseses to do stuff for them, original,
Yeah.
comprehensive material. To me, the Greyhound, I can't imagine that makes sense on any sort of level. Maybe Apple TV threw a boatload of money at the production studio behind it to kind of, get themselves on the map. But
Yeah.
you got to think the eyeballs on Greyhound at this point are minuscule compared to almost any other streaming platform. I don't know. I don't know enough about the behind the scenes about how the numbers are crunched, how things are successful. But I do know that some of the original Netflix films, by viewing measures, have been huge. Bird Box and
Yeah.
The Old Guard, and gosh, there was some horrible Ryan Reynolds movie directed by Michael Bay. I couldn't even get through it. It was
Actually,
torturous. Something
was that
six,
Six Underground?
something like that. It was.
Yeah. All right. This is where I have to acknowledge that you have much more sophisticated taste than me, because I enjoyed that movie.
Well,
It
you're
was
not
so
alone.
absurdly over the top. 15 minutes in, I was actually laughing. The level of action was so extreme. It was action and sort of comedic gore for 20 minutes to just literally open the film. It's like, okay, I'm hooked. I have to watch the rest of it. It was typical Michael Bay. There was like an explosion every 30 seconds.
But that movie has a big director, has a lot of recognizable stars, went straight to Netflix.
Yeah.
And, it may have done well in theaters, but they feel like that's worth it. And maybe they need to do that to compete with all the other streaming platforms. I don't know. Again, you got to go behind the scenes. Netflix keeps a lot of their numbers secret. They release only certain bits of information. It would seem, I can't seem to crunch the numbers in that Netflix pays so much money for their content. A staggering amount. And yet you pay $13 a month to access all of it. It doesn't seem to add up. But again, financial situations are not my strength, so I don't really kind of get it. But that's what they're doing right now. They seem to be successful. They seem to be thriving. And so, yeah, I think that will. I would think that if you're a Tom Hanks and you're making a movie, you'd want to maybe go to Netflix or Amazon. You would think that Apple TV is too small, but I think Apple TV is trying to be a player in this space, so they probably overwhelm them. That's my guess.
So was that movie originally supposed to go to the theaters and then
Oh, yes.
Apple? So
Yes.
so the deal with Apple, was it set up in advance, or was it a reaction to not being able to go to the theaters because of COVID?
To the best of my knowledge, it was a reaction to that was theatrical bound for
Wow.
sure.
So they were able, I mean, what a save. I mean, think about that. On the fly, in reaction to COVID, they were able to completely redo their approach to release and get apparently big money out of Apple to send it straight to them.
Yeah, and one other note about this, Bill and Ted 3, Bill and Ted Face the Music. Boy, the trailer looks bad, but I'm kind of still hoping it's good.
Yeah.
That was going to be in theaters right now, and this could change tomorrow. Right now, they're planning an early September release on video on demand and in theaters.
Okay.
Same day.
Wow.
And that's a big deal because that's what the theaters have really feared. They wanted that window where you need to see it in theaters before you can see it at home. That window's been shrinking and shrinking. It could be gone. And we'll see what happens if that remains, if the theaters open. Will people opt to go to a theater when they could see it at home?
I mean,
I'm fascinated by it.
Wasn't pretty much the consensus that we're overbuilt in terms of numbers of theaters before COVID?
Yeah, the theatrical model had some holes in it for sure. Ticket sales have gone down. I think the numbers haven't gone down dramatically because the prices are going up, but it certainly was shrinking a bit. And of course, all bets are off now based on this year. But yeah, I mean, listen, the more flat screens there are, the more easy it is to stream, the better quality the entertainment is. Why would you go to a theater? Now, my thinking a few months ago was, well, you're on a date, you want to go out with your wife, you want to go with your buddies. It's a girls' night. There are lots of reasons why people had gone to theaters. How is that going to change? I think it's changing, but we'll see.
And yeah, I still much prefer the theater going experience, but I just think over time you're going to start to question the cost of it, and then The other thing, if they do start shutting them down, are there going to be ones nearby? It's a huge question. But one maybe we can address in a future discussion and see what's happened post-COVID.
It's funny when I have conversations like this with fellow podcasters. I feel it's almost therapeutic to me. Yeah. And forgive me if I wax too philosophical, but I have all these emotions, and it's great to go on Twitter and share them. And I've been on Parler now, and that's wonderful. But there's so much going on in our lives. It's frustrating.
Yeah, I really enjoy this too, and I really enjoy the discussions with you in particular. It's been a fantastic conversation. What can you tell us about what you've got going, your website, et cetera, so that the listeners can find you and seek out your content?
Well, my website is hollywoodintoto.com. On Twitter, it's @HollywoodInToto, and also on Parler, same tag. And I've been writing a lot more for the Daily Wire, so it's been kind of fun to reach out to a different audience. And I've got something else.
You're the new Ben Shapiro, since he's stepping partially away, right?
No one could replace Ben Shapiro. And I've got a project that's sort of in its infancy, which could be a lot of fun. I can't say more about it. Hopefully it'll come to fruition. We could talk about it more next time, but I'm kind of excited about it.
All right, that's great. It's been fantastic. Great discussion as always. Thank you very much for joining, Christian.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, that was fantastic. I always love talking with Christian. Remember, I'll be back next week with another episode of Political Spirits. Be sure to tell your friends about Political Spirits and like the podcast on Facebook at Political Spirits, and follow me and the podcast on Twitter at Franklin Rye. And remember, all episodes are now on YouTube as well, and the YouTube channel is named Political Spirits Network. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, and select all after you hit the bell. This is Franklin Rye. Thank you for listening.